The conference room fell into a thick, uncomfortable silence as Monica Lane stepped in, her 6-year-old son, Tyler, cradled tightly in her arms. His face was pale, eyes glazed, wheezing softly into her neck. She walked briskly to the front row, balancing her presentation folder and the boy's inhaler in one hand. She hadn't slept more than 2 hours the night before. The ER waiting room had been cold and loud, and Tyler had coughed through most of it. But the Miller account presentation was scheduled for 9 a.m., and after 6 years of building her career at Whitestone and Chase, she knew missing it wasn't an option. "Monica," a voice snapped from across the room, slicing through the hushed whispers. "What is that child doing here?" Pamela Whitmore, Director of Human Capital, a woman whose heels always clicked like a countdown and whose smiles were more blade than warmth. She didn't look at Tyler. She looked through him, through Monica. And the rest of the room followed her lead, every intern analyst and junior manager quickly busying themselves with their phones or notepads, pretending not to see the scene unraveling in front of them. "I'm sorry, Ms. Whitmore," Monica said calmly, pressing the inhaler gently to Tyler's lips. His asthma flared up again. "The sitter canceled last minute, but the presentation is ready. I can still. This is a professional environment, not a clinic." Pamela's voice rose sharp and clear, the tone she reserved for public reprimands. "You know the policy. No personal distractions during work hours. And certainly no children." Monica's arms tensed around her son. She could feel his shallow breaths, the slight tremble in his small body. "I didn't want to miss this," she said quietly, holding her ground. "I thought I could manage both." Pamela took a step forward, phone in hand. Monica noticed it now, how the screen was angled toward her. Recording. Always recording. "You thought wrong," Pamela said. "Effective immediately, your employment with Whitestone and Chase is terminated?" Someone gasped. Monica wasn't sure who. She glanced around the room. No one met her eyes. The same people she'd stayed late with on deadlines, covered for during mistakes, coached through presentations. They were all suddenly experts at looking busy. Her stomach turned, not with embarrassment, but with something colder, cleaner, the beginning of clarity. Pamela turned to the others. "Let this serve as a reminder. Professionalism requires sacrifice. Weakness has no place in this firm." Tyler coughed again. Monica fumbled to wipe his mouth, eyes stinging, but not from shame. There was no room left for shame. Robert, the guy sitting 2 chairs away, the same one whose $1,000,000 error she had quietly fixed last quarter, was now intensely studying his shoelaces. Security was called. Pamela gave a satisfied nod, stepping back as if she had successfully sanitized the space. "You'll need to return your badge and company laptop. And the keys to the leased car," she added with a sneer. Monica stood tall, adjusted Tyler in her arms, and calmly nodded. "Of course." As she turned to gather her things, she felt her chest tightening, not from grief, but from restraint. There was so much she wanted to say, so much she could say, but not yet. "Mommy, why is that lady being mean to us?" Tyler whispered, his voice barely audible. The question, so simple and piercing, broke something in the room. A few heads turned. Jennifer from HR looked down. Marcus from Business Development adjusted his tie with shaking fingers. Monica didn't whisper back. She straightened her shoulders and spoke aloud, her voice clear and firm, because some people mistake cruelty for strength. But that doesn't make them right. She walked across the conference room floor without flinching. Her heels didn't click like Pamela's, they made no noise at all, but still commanded attention. In her arms, Tyler clung to her inhaler, pressed to his chest like a shield. At the elevator, as the door slid shut, Monica looked down at her son. She smiled just slightly. "This isn't the end, baby," she whispered. "This is where the real story begins." And though the cameras were no longer rolling and the conference room had already returned to its muted rhythm, no one watching her leave would forget that look, not of defeat, but of precision, of purpose. The kind of look that only a woman who'd been underestimated one too many times could wear. Pamela Whitmore had no idea what she had just ignited, and Monica Lane had no intention of going quietly. The elevator doors closed with a soft click, and as Monica descended with Tyler still tucked close, 1,000 thoughts raced behind her composed expression. Her arms ached, her body was tired, but her mind had never been sharper. This wasn't just about losing a job. This was about what had been taken from her without hesitation, respect, dignity, security. And what Pamela hadn't expected was that Monica didn't crumble. She calculated. By the time they reached the ground floor, Monica had already mapped her next move in silence. That evening, after a quiet dinner of leftover rice and canned beans, Monica tucked Tyler into the worn-out couch they'd turned into his bed months ago. The small apartment buzzed with the noise of traffic outside, but inside was a different storm. Anger, hurt, and something colder, something precise. She sat at the small kitchen table, opened her dented old laptop, and stared at the blinking cursor for a long moment before typing the name Pamela Whitmore. Then in the corner of her desktop, she created a folder and labeled it Project Whitmore. Monica had grown up watching her mother navigate hardship like an art. She remembered one night when she was 16, her mother hunched over a stack of eviction notices. "Rich people always leave clues," she had whispered. "You just have to know where to look." Monica never forgot that, and now sitting in the dim kitchen light, she understood exactly what her mother had meant. She began pulling threads, searching Pamela's LinkedIn, cross-referencing past employees, combing through company policies stored in her email archives. She noticed a pattern almost immediately. Pamela had let go of 17 employees over the past 2 years. 15 of them were women, 12 were minorities. All were dismissed under vague subjective terms, not a cultural fit, emotional instability, failure to meet undefined standards. At around midnight, Monica sent a message to the only person she trusted with what she was about to do, Elliot Banks. "Hey, it's Monica Lane. I know it's late, but I need a favor," Elliot replied almost instantly. "You good?" "Not exactly, but I will be. Can I call you?" Minutes later, they were on the phone. Monica told him everything, her firing the video, Pamela's LinkedIn post that had gone viral with hashtags like "our tough leadership" and "no excuses." And then she told him what she'd begun to uncover. Elliot was quiet for a long time. "Damn," he finally said. "I knew Pamela was ambitious, but she's building a brand off humiliation." "She's not just humiliating people," Monica replied. "She's documenting it, publicly, with pride." Elliot exhaled. "Send me everything you've got. I'll start digging." When the call ended, Monica sat in the quiet for a moment longer. Tyler stirred in his sleep, coughing once. She walked over, covered him with the thinner of their 2 blankets, and gently brushed his forehead. He was the reason she had endured years of condescension, of being overlooked in meetings, of smiling through moments when she wanted to scream. She had endured all of it believing hard work would be enough, but now she knew better. Hard work wasn't the answer. Strategy was. Back at the kitchen table, Monica resumed her research with a new edge in her eyes. She wasn't just going to expose Pamela. She was going to dismantle the system that allowed Pamela to rise in the first place. And she wouldn't do it with rage or with noise. She'd do it the way smart women had survived for centuries, by observing, remembering, and knowing exactly when to strike. Outside, the city kept moving, unaware that in a small apartment just a few blocks from the financial district, a woman was building the quiet beginning of a storm. Not the kind that raged, the kind that changed everything. The next morning, Monica awoke with the kind of clarity that doesn't come from rest, but from purpose. The exhaustion hadn't left her body, but her mind was electric. Tyler was still asleep, curled into the corner of the couch, his tiny chest rising and falling in soft rhythm. Monica kissed his forehead, whispered a promise, "Mommy's going to fix this," then turned back to her laptop like it was a war map. Elliot called just after noon. "I did some digging," he said. "Monica, Pamela doesn't just fire people. She tracks them." "What do you mean she has a private file, digital and handwritten? Names, photos, performance notes, even personal gossip. She keeps records of people she's targeted, including you." Monica didn't say anything at first. She just stared at the chipped edge of her coffee mug, the silence between them stretching. "I'm sorry," Elliot said softly. "No." "Don't be," she replied. "She just handed me a loaded gun." That night, after Tyler went to bed, Monica began reaching out quietly, strategically. Her first message was to Rosa Delgado, a woman she hadn't spoken to in months. Rosa had once been a rising star in the communications department, sharp, organized, well-liked, until one day she was simply gone. Fired for emotional volatility after requesting time off to care for her terminally ill mother. When Rosa picked up, her voice cracked. "Monica, I was just thinking about you." Within 20 minutes, they were deep in conversation. Rosa revealed more than Monica could have guessed: doctored performance reviews, misplaced reports, meetings sabotaged by Pamela to justify eventual termination. But Rosa had kept everything. Every email, every calendar invite, every snide comment disguised as mentorship. "I always had a feeling I'd need it someday," she said. Looks like I was right. By the end of the week, Monica had connected with 4 other women, each with their own version of the same story. Different departments, different circumstances, same end result. They were erased by the same smiling blade. And they all had evidence. Monica created a group chat and named it Project Justice. The name wasn't dramatic, it was accurate. Because now it wasn't just about her. It was about every woman who had walked into Whitestone and Chase full of potential, only to be quietly pushed out before she had a chance to bloom. Elliot sent another update late one evening. "Monica, she's not working alone." Attached was a screenshot of a WhatsApp group chat between Pamela and several high-ranking female executives across different firms. The conversations weren't overt, but they were clear. Names of employees were mentioned, flagged with terms like cultural misfit, risk to stability, keep on radar. It was a blacklist. An informal network of whisper campaigns, carefully coded language, and silent doors closing. Monica stared at the screen. For a long moment, she felt the weight of it, the pattern, the power imbalance, the quiet precision of it all. And then, like a switch flipping inside her, she stood up, crossed the apartment, and looked at Tyler, fast asleep, with his worn teddy bear tucked under one arm. He'll never walk into a place where someone like Pamela gets to decide his worth, she thought. She turned back to her laptop, opened a blank document, and began to type the introduction to a report she never imagined she'd write. Dates, names, quotes, screenshots. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was a case, one that would demand to be heard. And somewhere in the night, as the group chat buzzed with new contributions, Monica Lane became something more than a victim of workplace injustice. She became the architect of its reckoning. It was around 1 a.m. when the final piece fell into place. Monica had been reviewing the financial documents Elliot had unearthed: expense reports, fund allocations, training program invoices. At first glance, everything looked clean, impressive even. But then she noticed the same invoice title appearing multiple times across different months, attached to different dollar amounts. Executive Skills Enhancement Workshop, Level 3. There were no actual workshops, no attendee lists, no venue bookings. She leaned back slowly, her breath caught in her chest. Pamela hadn't just been cruel, she'd been stealing. The next morning, Monica called Caroline Myers. She'd only met her once in passing at the office, a sharp, polished young consultant with an impressive resume and an air of someone born into the right family. Word was she was the daughter of Senator Daniel Myers, currently running for governor, with a platform built on supporting working parents. 3 days earlier, Pamela had fired Caroline in a now familiar fashion, cold, public, and entirely unjustified. The mistake: Caroline had requested a flexible work schedule to care for her newborn. That was enough. Her dismissal video had already gone live on Pamela's LinkedIn page with the caption, "Leadership isn't always easy. Tough decisions, always." Caroline picked up on the second ring. "I know who you are," she said, "and I think I know why you're calling." Within an hour, they met in a quiet cafe downtown. Caroline looked less polished now, tired, angry, humiliated. Monica recognized that look. She'd worn it too. "Let me guess," Caroline said, stirring her coffee. "You have a folder." Monica opened her laptop, turned it toward her. More than a folder. She walked Caroline through everything: Pamela's personal file, the WhatsApp group, the embezzlement, the patterns of discriminatory firing, the fake training programs. Caroline's face went from tight-lipped shock to something far more dangerous: righteous fury. "My father's campaign team needs a case like this," she said. "They've been talking about corporate reform for months, but this gives them a face, a story, evidence." That same week, Monica's story and Pamela's downfall became the centerpiece of a televised special called America Exposed: Behind Corporate Doors. Caroline's media connections made sure every major platform picked it up. The opening segment featured the raw footage of Monica's dismissal, a black mother holding her sick child while being publicly humiliated for choosing family over protocol. Then came the damning evidence: Internal documents, discriminatory patterns, the group chat, the trophy file, and finally the embezzlement. Pamela's empire collapsed in under 48 hours. At Whitestone and Chase, the fallout was immediate. Pamela was escorted out of the building by security guards while a national news camera rolled from across the street. The firm's CEO resigned within days. Shareholders withdrew. Clients vanished. The office Monica had once stood in with her son now had a space available sign in the window. But Monica wasn't interested in revenge. Not really. What she felt was something deeper, a quiet, earned satisfaction. Not because she'd destroyed something, but because she'd proven something that dignity doesn't make you weak and silence doesn't mean defeat. Job offers came almost immediately. 3 of the biggest firms in the city reached out within a week, each praising her composure, her strategy, her leadership. But Monica didn't rush to say yes. She waited, thought, took walks with Tyler, slept for the first time in months. One morning while Tyler drew at the kitchen table, he looked up and asked Mom, "Are we going to be okay now?" She smiled and brushed a curl from his forehead. "We already are." The storm had passed, but something bigger had begun. Monica could feel it in the air, and she wasn't done, not even close. The calm after the storm was strange. Not quiet. Monica's phone rang almost constantly with interview requests, legal teams, advocacy groups, and journalists eager for the next angle. But internally there was a hush, a kind of stillness that comes not from peace, but from resolution. Pamela Whitmore had lost everything. She was fired on live television, her exit from Whitestone and Chase as public and humiliating as the dismissal she once orchestrated. But Monica didn't watch the footage. She didn't need to. She had already seen the real collapse, the kind that happens behind the eyes when someone realizes their power was never real. But even as headlines blared and public opinion surged, Monica felt the weight of what it had taken. The missed meals, the nights Tyler coughed until morning, the unbearable silence from people she once called colleagues. Winning didn't erase the cost. It only made it visible. One evening, Rosa came over carrying takeout and a bottle of wine. They sat cross-legged on Monica's floor while Tyler played with his toy cars nearby. You ever think Rosa asked, between bites of sesame noodles, how close we came to just letting it go? Monica nodded. If I'd had $50 more in my bank account, I might have. They laughed not out of humor but survival. It was a sound layered with relief, weariness, and something else, pride. Because they hadn't let it go. And because of that, everything had changed. Whitestone and Chase officially filed for bankruptcy 3 months after the scandal. With the lawsuits piling in 15 in total and a federal investigation underway, their client list evaporated. One by one, companies that had once quietly collaborated with Pamela's blacklist began issuing public statements, updating HR policies, scrambling to distance themselves. Monica watched it all from a distance. She didn't gloat, she didn't post, she observed, because this wasn't just about punishment, it was about precedent. And it was working. Other women began to speak up, former employees from other firms, other industries. Hashtags spread. Anonymous forums buzzed with stories and screenshots. Some of the stories were eerily similar to hers. Others were far worse. But each voice added to something bigger: momentum. It wasn't long before the media began calling it the Monica effect. At first she rolled her eyes at the term, but then one night, while tucking Tyler into bed, he looked at her with wide, tired eyes and said, "Are you that Monica?" She laughed. "I guess I am. Like, the one on TV, maybe." He pulled the blanket up under his chin. "That's cool." She kissed his forehead and turned off the light, but his quiet words stayed with her into the night. Yes, it was cool, but it had also been brutal. Behind the headlines and applause was a woman who had nearly broken under pressure. A mother who'd once stood in a pharmacy line, wondering if she should buy her son's medication or groceries for the week. A woman who had smiled through condescension, absorbed insult after insult, and still believed, however foolishly, that showing up early and staying late would someday be enough. It wasn't. And now she knew being enough had never been the problem. The system had been rigged to pretend she wasn't. So no, Monica didn't celebrate with confetti or champagne. Her victory was quieter, more grounded. She celebrated by updating her resume, turning down interviews she didn't trust, helping Rosa secure a new leadership role at a nonprofit, And most importantly, watching her son sleep through the night without wheezing. That more than anything felt like justice. But justice wasn't where the story ended. It was only where she stopped surviving and started building. Monica didn't plan to return to the spotlight. She had imagined a quieter chapter, maybe working behind the scenes, helping other women navigate the same fires she'd just walked through. But fate, it seemed, wasn't finished with her yet. It started with a phone call from Caroline Myers. "They passed it," she said breathlessly. "It's real. It's happening." Monica stood in her kitchen staring out the window at the early morning fog curling over the rooftops. "Passed what the Workplace Equity and Protection Bill. They named it after you." Monica blinked. "What do you mean after me?" "It's officially called the Lane Act. Your name. In the legislation." The room went still. Tyler was humming to himself at the table, coloring a picture of a woman in a red blazer holding a briefcase like a sword. He looked up and waved. Monica managed a small smile. The Lane Act. A law that would now require companies to disclose internal disciplinary data, prohibit informal blacklisting, and implement third-party audits for workplace discrimination complaints. All because she hadn't gone home quietly. All because she hadn't let humiliation define her. The news spread fast. Within days, Monica's inbox flooded with speaking requests from law schools, women's organizations, human rights foundations. Her face appeared on magazine covers. Editorials debated whether she was a symbol, a hero, or simply someone who had perfect timing. She ignored most of it. Because while the world discussed her, she stayed focused on what mattered. Like Tyler's new pediatrician who worked at a top-tier medical center and knew his case history by heart. Like Rosa's promotion to Director of Community Strategy at a major nonprofit. Like the day she walked into her new office on the 23rd floor of Davies & Partners as their new CEO. The corner office overlooked Boston Harbor. It was sleek and quiet with glass walls and soft lighting. But Monica's favorite part was a simple photograph on her desk. Tyler, in a superhero cape, holding a cardboard briefcase, his smile wide, fierce. One afternoon, Rosa dropped by with coffee and news. "I ran into Pamela yesterday," she said casually, taking a sip, "at a grocery store in Dorchester." Monica raised an eyebrow, and she was applying for a cashier job. Didn't even recognize me at first. She looked small. Monica said nothing at first. She didn't feel joy or vindication, only a soft, strange sadness like seeing the ruins of a building she once feared. "I guess she finally understands what it's like to be invisible." Rosa nodded. "Yeah, the world looks different from down there." That evening, Monica sat with Tyler on their balcony, watching the lights across the harbor flicker on one by one. "Mom," he asked, tracing his finger along the rail. "Do you think that lady ever thinks about us?" Monica exhaled slowly. "Maybe. But it doesn't matter. Why not? Because we don't need her to. We made it. And that's enough." He leaned into her side, his small body warm and quiet. In the distance, the city buzzed as always, unaware of the soft miracle unfolding in one mother's heart. The power of turning pain into protection, not just for herself, but for everyone who came after. Monica had never wanted to be famous. She only ever wanted to be heard. And now that she was, she planned to use her voice not to scream, but to build. The invitation arrived in a navy blue envelope with gold lettering, Women in Leadership Summit. Keynote speaker, Monica Lane. She stared at it for a long time before opening it, as if somehow the weight of what she'd lived through had been sealed inside. She didn't immediately say yes. In fact, she almost threw it away. The thought of standing in front of 2,000 women retelling the hardest year of her life felt more daunting than anything she'd faced in a courtroom, a boardroom, or behind a closed office door. But something about Tyler's quiet presence that night, him sitting cross-legged on the carpet, drawing yet another superhero in a pantsuit, shifted something in her. "I think she's you," he said, holding up the sketch. "But stronger." Monica smiled softly. "You think I'm strong?" He looked at her like the answer was obvious. "You made the bad lady go away." So she said yes. When the day came, Monica stood backstage in a tailored cream suit, her notes clutched in one hand, a small pendant of her mother's around her neck. The lights beyond the curtain cast soft halos across the packed ballroom. She could hear the murmurs of anticipation, the clink of coffee cups, the shuffling of high heels against polished floors. But all she felt was calm. When they called her name, the room erupted into applause, not polite, not perfunctory. It was the kind that said, "We see you." The kind that had once been denied to her in every meeting, every silent dismissal, every backhanded compliment masked as feedback. She stepped onto the stage and looked out at the crowd, a sea of women, black, white, brown, young, seasoned mothers, daughters, mentors, dreamers. For a moment, she said nothing. Then a year ago, I was fired for bringing my sick child to work. The room fell still. I stood in a conference room holding my son, while a woman in a suit told me I was unprofessional, unfit, and expendable. And for a moment, I believed her. She let that hang in the air. But here's the truth: what she called weakness was actually power. She just didn't know it yet. She spoke for 20 minutes about silence, resilience, strategy, and dignity, about how justice doesn't always arrive with noise, but sometimes with files, patterns, and quiet women refusing to disappear. She didn't name Pamela. She didn't have to. When she ended with, "You don't rewrite the rules by yelling, you rewrite them by surviving long enough to build new ones," the room rose to its feet. Some were crying, some were cheering, all were changed. Later that night, Monica sat in her office alone, scrolling through messages, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. One caught her eye. It was from Caroline Myers, just got out of a Senate meeting. They passed another amendment, strengthened the Lane Act, more funding for workplace equity enforcement. This thing's not just a law anymore. It's a movement. Monica leaned back in her chair, exhaled, and closed her eyes. She thought of her mother sorting papers at the kitchen table all those years ago, whispering that intelligence would always outlast brute force. She thought of every woman who had been told to be quiet, to be small, to be grateful for scraps. And then she opened her eyes, turned her chair toward the window, and looked down at the city below, still moving, still loud, still complicated, but no longer untouchable, because somewhere out there, another Monica Lane had just been told she wasn't enough, and this time, she wouldn't believe it. Thank you for watching Monica's powerful journey, a story not just of survival, but of transformation. If this inspired you or reminded you of someone who needs to hear it, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others. Your support helps us bring more real, emotional, and meaningful stories to life. Together, let's keep telling stories that matter.